The rain hammered down like bullets on windshields that morning, and Serafina Vale was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She didn't know it yet. All she knew was the clock on her dashboard screaming 7:47 a.m., her shift starting at 8 o'clock, and some arrogant jerk in a Maserati blocking the entire intersection like he owned the city. Her knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Her son's lunchbox sat in the passenger seat, forgotten in her panic. One more late arrival, and her supervisor would write her up. One more write-up, and she'd lose the job that kept the lights on. The Maserati didn't move. Just sat there, sleek and black and expensive, rain sliding off it like it was too good to get wet. She leaned on her horn. Long, loud, angry. Nothing. She honked again, this time holding it down until her palm hurt. The brake lights flickered, and then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out into the rain, and even through the downpour, she could see he moved like someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. Tall, dark suit that probably cost more than her rent. He walked toward her car with the kind of calm that made her blood boil hotter. Serafina threw open her door and stepped into the rain. "Are you kidding me right now? Move your car." He stopped 3 feet away, rain soaking his perfectly styled black hair, and looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. His eyes were dark, cold, Italian features that could have been carved from marble. "Your engine is smoking," he said, his accent wrapped around each word like velvet over steel. "What?" "Your car. It's overheating. You should pull over before it dies completely." He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather, not her entire life falling apart. "I don't need advice from some rich," she stopped herself, but barely. "Just move your car so I can get to work." Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or curiosity. "You're running late." Brilliant observation. She crossed her arms, rain streaming down her scrubs. "Are you going to move, or do I need to call the cops?" He tilted his head slightly. "Do you always speak to strangers like this? Do you always block traffic like you own the road?" For a moment, they just stared at each other. Thunder rolled overhead. The rain got harder. Other cars started honking behind them, a chorus of Boston morning rage. "What's your name?" he asked. "None of your business." But her hospital ID badge hung around her neck, visible through her clear rain jacket. She saw his eyes flick down to it, saw him read it. "Serafina." He said it slowly, like he was tasting each syllable. "Italian parents?" "Move. Your car." He smiled then, just barely, just enough to make her want to scream. "You have fire," he said. "Most people don't anymore. Most people don't have time for whatever this is." She gestured wildly at him, at his car, at the entire ridiculous situation. "I have a son waiting for me to pick him up after school. I have bills I can barely pay. I have a supervisor who will fire me if I'm late again. So unless you're planning to write me a check for all of that, get out of my way." He studied her for another long moment. Then he pulled out his wallet, and she thought he might actually try to give her money, which would have made her lose it completely. But instead, he pulled out a business card and held it out to her. She didn't take it. "I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. I'm not selling anything." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne mixing with rain. "But something tells me we'll meet again. Not if I can help it." He placed the card on her hood, where the rain immediately started to soak it. Then he walked back to his Maserati, got in, and pulled smoothly around her car and through the intersection. Serafina stood there, soaking wet, shaking with adrenaline and anger. Behind her, cars honked. She grabbed the card off her hood before jumping back in her car. The engine coughed when she turned the key, sputtered, then caught. Black smoke did curl from under the hood, just like he'd said. She glanced at the card. Expensive cardstock. Just a name and a phone number. Lorenzo DiCarlo. She threw in the trash cup holder and pulled into traffic. She made it to the hospital with 2 minutes to spare. Her supervisor gave her a look that said she was already on thin ice. The morning shift blurred by in a chaos of patient charts and medication rounds, and trying not to think about the mechanic bills she couldn't afford. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. By lunch, she'd almost forgotten about the man in the rain. Almost. But something about his eyes kept coming back to her. The way he'd looked at her like he could see right through to all the things she was trying to hide. The exhaustion, the fear, the constant scramble to keep her head above water. Her phone buzzed during her break. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Vale. A woman's voice. Professional. Polished. Yes. I'm calling on behalf of a private client who requires home nursing care. Your credentials came highly recommended. The position pays $200 per hour, flexible scheduling around your current employment. Serafina's coffee went cold in her hand. I'm sorry, what? $200 per hour. The client is elderly, requires basic care and companionship. 20 hours per week to start. Would you be interested in an interview? It was too good to be true. It had to be. Nobody paid that much for basic nursing care. Who referred me? A pause. The family prefers to discuss that in person. Are you available tomorrow evening? Every instinct screamed trap. But $200 an hour was $4,000 a week. $16,000 a month. That was Eliur's college fund. That was fixing the car. That was breathing room she hadn't had in 9 years. Where's the interview? She heard herself ask. I'll text you the address. 6 p.m. tomorrow. And Ms. Vale, dress professionally. The family appreciates presentation. The call ended. 30 seconds later, a text came through with an address in Beacon Hill. Old money territory. The kind of neighborhood where she'd never belong. She should have said no. Should have deleted the text and forgotten the whole thing. But that night, after picking up Eliur from the neighbor who watched him after school, after making dinner from whatever was left in the pantry, after helping him with homework at their tiny kitchen table, she looked at that address again. And she thought about the man in the rain, about his card in her trash cup holder, about the way he'd said they'd meet again, like he knew something she didn't. She pulled out the card. Still damp. Still expensive. She held it up to the light, turned it over. Nothing but a name and number. Lorenzo DiCarlo. She put in her wallet, though she couldn't say why. The next evening, she stood outside a mansion that made her feel like she'd driven into a different century. Marble columns, manicured gardens, even in late autumn. The kind of wealth that didn't just whisper, it echoed through generations. A butler answered the door. Actual butler, in an actual suit. Ms. Vale, right this way. Her heels clicked on marble floors worth more than her entire apartment building. Art that belonged in museums hung on the walls. The air smelled like old money and secrets. The butler led her to a study, knocked twice, and opened the door. A man stood at the window, back to her, phone pressed to his ear. He spoke in rapid Italian, voice low and sharp. Then he ended the call and turned around. Serafina's breath caught. Lorenzo DiCarlo stood there in the same expensive suit, the same cold eyes, the same slight smile that said he'd known this would happen all along. You, she whispered. He walked toward her slowly, hands in his pockets, completely at ease. Me, he agreed. Thank you for coming, Ms. Vale. My mother could use someone with your particular brand of honesty. This is you planned this. I made a phone call. He stopped a few feet away. The question is whether you're brave enough to take the job, or if that fire I saw was all talk. The apartment smelled like burnt toast and broken dreams when Serafina got home that night. She'd walked out of Lorenzo DiCarlo's mansion without saying another word. Just turned on her heel and left him standing there with that infuriating half-smile. But the job offer sat in her purse like a ticking bomb. For $1,000 a week. She kept doing the math in her head, kept coming back to the same impossible number. Eliur was at the kitchen table, pencil moving across his homework in careful loops. 9 years old and already more thoughtful than most adults she knew. He looked up when she came in, and his face lit up the way it always did. Like she was the best thing in his world. Like she hadn't spent his entire life barely keeping him afloat. Mom, I got an A on my science project. She dropped her purse and pulled him into a hug that lasted too long. He squirmed, but didn't complain. That's my smart boy. Mrs. Chun said I could be a doctor someday if I keep working hard. He pulled back, eyes bright. Like you. I'm not a doctor, baby. I'm just a nurse assistant. You help people. That's the same thing. He said it with such certainty, like the world was that simple. Like titles and degrees didn't matter. Like love and effort were enough. She wished she still believed that. After dinner, after Eliur fell asleep in the bedroom they shared because she'd given him the only other room Serafina sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of cheap wine. She typed Lorenzo De Carlo's name into the search bar. The results made her blood run cold. De Carlo crime family. Boston's oldest Italian Mafia dynasty. Federal investigations. Suspected money laundering. Photos of Lorenzo at charity galas. Always in expensive suits. Always with that same unreadable expression. One article called him the Ice Prince of Boston's underworld. Another said he'd taken over the family business after his father's suspicious death 3 years ago. She slammed the laptop shut. This was insane. She couldn't work for a mobster. Didn't matter how much he paid. Didn't matter that her car was dying and the rent was due, and Elliot needed new shoes because his toes were cramping in the old ones. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Ms. Vale, this is Isabella from yesterday. Mr. De Carlo wanted me to clarify that the position is strictly for his mother's care. Nothing else. He understands if you need time to consider. I'm not interested. He also wanted me to mention that your father's construction company was bought out by Meridian Holdings in 2015. He has information about where those assets went. He's willing to share that information regardless of whether you accept the position. The wine glass shook in her hand. What did you just say? Your father's inheritance, Ms. Vale. Mr. De Carlo knows what happened to it. The line went dead. Serafina sat there in her tiny kitchen, surrounded by peeling wallpaper and unpaid bills, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Her father's company. The construction business he'd built from nothing, that was supposed to secure her future. It had vanished overnight after he died, swallowed by some corporation she'd never heard of. Her mother had died trying to fight for it in court, and Lorenzo De Carlo knew where it went. She looked at Elliot's backpack by the door, held together with duct tape. Looked at the eviction notice she'd hidden in her desk drawer. Looked at her reflection in the dark window, 32 years old and already so tired. Her phone rang again. This time, she answered. Tomorrow, she said. I'll start tomorrow. Would you work for someone dangerous if it meant saving everything you love? Drop your thoughts below. The next morning, she dropped Elliot at school and drove to the address Isabella had texted. It wasn't the mansion this time. It was a medical supply office in downtown Boston. A lawyer met her there with a contract that made her head spin. Non disclosure agreements. Liability waivers. A salary that seemed obscene for basic elderly care. She signed everything. Mr. De Carlo will see you at the estate at 2 p.m., the lawyer said. Someone will be waiting. The estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic like a crown on a king's head. Serafina had never seen anything like it. Gray stone that looked older than America itself. Windows that caught the afternoon sun and threw it back like shields. Gardens that sprawled in perfect geometric patterns. The kind of place where history happened, where empires were built and blood was spilled and nobody ever talked about either. Her car looked ridiculous in the circular driveway. A dying Toyota next to 3 luxury vehicles that cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. She almost turned around. Almost put the car in reverse and drove back to her safe, small, struggling life. But then the front door opened and the butler appeared. Same one from before. He gave her a nod like she was expected, like she belonged here. She didn't belong here. She got out anyway. The butler led her through hallways lined with portraits of severe-looking men and elegant women. De Carlo's going back generations, all with the same dark eyes, all staring down at her like they knew she was an imposter. The air smelled like furniture polish and secrets. Her footsteps echoed too loud on the marble. They stopped at a door at the end of the east wing. The butler knocked twice. Come in. Lorenzo's voice muffled through the wood. The butler opened the door and stepped aside. Serafina walked in and stopped dead. Lorenzo stood by a fireplace, but he wasn't alone. An elderly woman sat in a wheelchair by the window, blanket over her lap, silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Even from across the room, Serafina could see the sharp intelligence in her eyes. This was someone who'd been beautiful once. Someone who'd wielded power. You came, Lorenzo said. Not a question. A statement. I signed a contract. Contracts can be broken. He walked toward her, each step measured. What really brought you back? You know what? Say it. You have information about my father's company. About what happened to it. The words tasted bitter. About who stole from my family. Something flickered in his expression, almost like respect. My mother, Serafina. This is Signora Maria DiCarlo. The woman in the wheelchair lifted one frail hand. Come closer, child. Let me see you. Serafina crossed the room, very aware of Lorenzo watching her every move. She knelt beside the wheelchair so their eyes were level. Signora DiCarlo studied her face for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it transformed her entire face. You have honest eyes. I haven't seen honest eyes in this house for a very long time. I'm here to take care of you, ma'am. No. The older woman's grip was surprisingly strong when she took Serafina's hand. You're here because my son is desperate to prove he's not like his father. And I'm here because someone in this family poisoned me slowly for 2 years. The room went cold. Mama. Lorenzo's voice was sharp. Warning. She should know what she's walking into, Lorenzo. Signora DiCarlo's eyes never left Serafina's. My husband died 3 years ago. His fortune was divided among our sons. But apparently, that wasn't enough for some of them. Have you ever realized too late that you walked into something way bigger than you expected? Comment what you would do. Serafina tried to stand, but the older woman held her hand tight. I'm not asking you to be part of this family's war. I'm asking you to help me stay alive long enough to see justice done. I'm just a nurse. You're someone who knows what it's like to be robbed by people who smile to your face. Signora DiCarlo's voice dropped to a whisper. Lorenzo told me about your father. About Meridian Holdings. Do you want to know who owns Meridian Holdings? Serafina's heart hammered. Boo, my second son, Antonio DiCarlo, Lorenzo's brother. Dinner at the DiCarlo estate was like watching a play where everyone knew their lines, but nobody believed them. 2 weeks had passed since Serafina started working there. 2 weeks of administering medications, monitoring vitals, and pretending not to notice the tension that crackled through every family gathering. She met them all now. The brothers, the cousins, the associates who weren't quite family, but weren't quite employees either. All of them circling each other like sharks. Antonio sat at one end of the table, handsome in a way that felt dangerous. Younger than Lorenzo by 2 years, but harder somehow. Crueler. He'd been nothing but charming to Serafina, which made her trust him even less. How's our mother today, Miss Vale? He asked, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. Improving. Her appetite is better. Wonderful. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Lorenzo, you've always had such good instincts about hiring the right people. Lorenzo didn't look up from his plate. She's the best. I'm sure she is. Antonio's gaze slid to Serafina, lingered just a moment too long. Tell me, Ms. Vale, what brought you to this line of work? Family nursing must be so different from hospital care. The pay is better. Laughter around the table. But Signora DiCarlo, sitting in her wheelchair at the head of the table, caught Serafina's eye and gave the tiniest nod. Approval. Honest, Antonio said. How refreshing. We could use more honesty in this family. Could we? Lorenzo's voice was soft, dangerous. I seem to remember honesty being discouraged at Father's funeral, when we were dividing the estate. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Antonio set down his fork carefully. What exactly are you implying, brother? I'm not implying anything. I am stating facts. Father's was changed 3 days before he died. Convenient timing. Our father was dying. He wanted to make sure everything was in order. Our father was poisoned. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Serafina's hand froze on her water glass. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Signora DiCarlo spoke, her voice steady despite the chaos. Boys, we have a guest. She's not a guest, Mama. She's staff. Antonio's charm had evaporated. Now he looked like what he was, something cold-blooded, and staff should know when to leave the room. I decide who stays and who goes in my presence, Signora DiCarlo said. Serafina stays. The brothers stared at each other across the table. Years of resentment and suspicion packed into that single look. Then Antonio stood, threw his napkin on his plate, and walked out. 2 of the cousins followed him. Lorenzo waited until the door closed. Then he downed his wine in one swallow. That went well, he said to nobody in particular. Later, after helping Signora De Carlo to bed, Serafina found Lorenzo in his study. She knocked on the open door. He looked up from paperwork, and for just a second, she saw how exhausted he was. How the weight of this family was crushing him. Your mother is settled for the night. Thank you. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Seat, please. She sat, though everything in her said to run. What you said at dinner, about your father being poisoned. Did you mean it? Every word. Then why haven't you gone to the police? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The police, right? And tell them what? That I suspect my brother of patricide, but have no proof? That my mother's health has been declining mysteriously for 2 years? That half my family would rather see me dead than in charge? He leaned back in his chair. Money doesn't buy justice, Serafina. It buries it. So you hire me to what? Bear witness. I hired you because my mother deserves someone who isn't part of this family sickness. Someone who still believes in right and wrong. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the ocean. And because when you stood in the rain and cursed me out, you reminded me that some people still have fire, still fight, even when the odds are impossible. Serafina joined him at the window. Below, waves crashed against the rocks. Relentless. Eternal. What do you want from me? The truth. If someone in this house is slowly killing my mother, I need you to find out who. I need evidence that will hold up in court. Real justice, not mob justice. That's not what I signed up for. I know. He turned to look at her, and this close, she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell his cologne, could feel the heat coming off him. But you're already part of this now. The moment you walked through that door, you became part of the story. The only question is whether you're going to help write the ending. What would you risk to expose the truth? Let me know in the comments. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. Two people who'd both been robbed by the powerful, both trying to survive in a world that didn't care about fair. She should have said no. Should have walked out right then. Instead, she said, if I do this, you tell me everything about Meridia Holdings. Everything about what your brother did to my father's company. Deal. They shook hands, and his grip was warm, firm, lasting just a second longer than necessary. When he let go, she felt the absence of his touch like cold water. That night, she couldn't sleep. Lay in the guest room they'd given her, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she'd just agreed to. The house was quiet except for the ocean. But beneath that quiet, she could feel something darker. Something waiting. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Leave the De Carlo house. While you still can. The storm hit on a Tuesday night like the world was trying to tear itself apart. Thunder that shook the windows. Lightning that turned the ocean into a writhing monster. Serafina had been at the estate for a month now, and she'd learned its rhythms. Learned which floorboards creaked. Learned which rooms the family avoided. Learned that Signora De Carlo had good days and bad days, and the bad days were getting worse. Tonight was the worst yet. Serafina. The older woman's voice was barely a whisper when she called out at midnight. I need to tell you something, before it's too late. Serafina rushed to her bedside, checked her pulse. Too fast, too weak. I should call Lorenzo. No. Signora De Carlo's grip was iron despite her frailty. No family. Just you. Just someone who isn't poisoned by this legacy. What are you talking about? My sons. She struggled to sit up, and Serafina helped her, propping pillows behind her back. Outside, lightning turned the room white for a heartbeat. They killed their father. Not all of them, but some, and they've been poisoning me ever since. Signora, you need a rest. Listen to me. The older woman's eyes were fierce, lucid in a way they hadn't been for days. My husband was a monster, built his fortune on blood and fear. I told myself I didn't know, but I knew. I always knew. Her voice cracked. I thought my sons would be different. Thought love could break the cycle. But some of them inherited his darkness. Thunder rattled the windows. Rain hammered the glass like it wanted in. Antonio poisoned his father. I heard him bragging about it to Marco, our cousin. They thought I was asleep. They thought the pills made me deaf as well as weak. She pulled Serafina closer. They put something in his nighttime medication. Made it look like heart failure. The doctors never questioned it. Why would they? Old man, weak heart, family history. Serafina's hands were shaking. She reached for her phone. I need to record this. We need evidence. Yes, record it. Tell the world what this family really is. Signora DiCarlo closed her eyes, tears leaking out. Lorenzo doesn't know. He suspects, but he doesn't know for certain. He still believes his brothers might be innocent. Still hopes family means something. Why haven't you told him? Because I'm a coward. Because I didn't want to believe I raised murderers. She opened her eyes again. But you can tell him. You can give him the truth he needs to finally break free of this cursed bloodline. Serafina started recording on her phone, hands trembling so hard she almost dropped it. Signora, can you repeat what you just told me? About Antonio and your husband. The older woman nodded. Started talking. Named names. Gave dates. Described conversations she'd overheard. Detailed the symptoms she'd been experiencing, the medications that weren't in her prescription list. The nights she'd woken up feeling like her blood was on fire. The confession lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes that would blow apart the DiCarlo family. 7 minutes that might get them both killed. When Signora DiCarlo finished, she sagged back against the pillows. Thank you, she whispered, for being brave when I couldn't be. We need to get you somewhere safe. Tonight. Too late for me, child. But not for you. Take that recording. Give it to Lorenzo. Let him decide what justice looks like. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then died completely. The backup generator should have kicked in immediately. It didn't. Serafina's blood turned to ice. Signora. Someone cut the power. The older woman's voice was eerily calm. Someone was listening. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. Serafina grabbed her phone, shoved it in her pocket, and moved to stand between the door and the bed. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break her ribs. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle turned. Antonio stood in the doorway, backlit by emergency lighting from a hall. He looked different in the shadows. Looked like the monster he'd been hiding all along. Ms. Vale, still awake. His voice was pleasant, casual, like he hadn't just cut the power in a storm. Like he wasn't blocking the only exit. Your mother needed me. Did she? He stepped into the room. You know, I've been meaning to talk to you. You've become very close to my mother these past few weeks. She tells you things. Doesn't she? I'm her nurse. She talks to me about her care. Her care. Right. Another step closer. Lightning flashed, turning his face demonic for a heartbeat. The thing is, Ms. Vale, my mother's condition has actually gotten worse since you arrived. Funny that. Almost like someone wants to keep her sick. Keep her talking. That's insane. Is it? He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne. Expensive. Suffocating. Or maybe you're working with my brother. Maybe this whole innocent nurse routine is just an act. Maybe Lorenzo sent you to spy on us. Behind her, Signora DiCarlo made a small sound. Afraid. Serafina stood her ground. Get out, or I'm calling security. Antonio smiled. Security works for me, Ms. Vale. The staff works for me. Even the doctors work for me. You're alone here. You and my meddling mother and my self-righteous brother. He pulled something from his pocket. A syringe. Now, you're going to give my mother her medication. And then we're all going to forget this conversation happened. Could you stay calm if someone threatened you with your worst fear? Share below. The recording burned in her pocket. 7 minutes of truth. 7 minutes that could end him. No, Serafina said. No. Antonio looked genuinely confused, like nobody had ever said that word to him before. No, I won't poison your mother. I won't be part of whatever sick game this is. His expression changed, hardened. Then you're fired. Get out. Tonight. I'm not going anywhere without her. She's not your mother. She's mine, and I decide what's best for her. You decided to murder your father. You decided to slowly kill your mother. You don't get to decide anything anymore. The words hung in the air between them. Proof she knew. Proof she was a threat. Antonio's hand moved toward his jacket, toward whatever weapon he kept there. And Serafina knew with absolute certainty that she was about to die in this room, in this storm, because she'd chosen truth over safety. and the door slammed open so hard it cracked against the wall. Lorenzo stood there, soaking wet from the rain, eyes blazing with something primal. "Touch her," he said quietly, "and I'll forget we're blood." The police sirens cut through the storm like knives through flesh. 20 minutes. That's all it took for everything to fall apart. 20 minutes between Lorenzo walking into that room and the first squad car pulling up to the DiCarlo estate with lights blazing red and blue against the rain. Serafina stood in the hallway, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, watching officers swarm through the house like ants. Her phone, the one with the recording, sat in an evidence bag. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Antonio had smiled when they led him away. Actually smiled. Like this was all part of some game, only he understood. "You think this ends with handcuffs?" he'd said to Lorenzo. "You have no idea what you've started, brother." Now Lorenzo stood by the window in his study, silent, watching his family's empire crumble in real time. Officers were going through files, questioning staff, cordoning off Signor DiCarlo's room as a crime scene. "Mr. DiCarlo?" A detective appeared in the doorway. Older guy, tired eyes, too many years of seeing the worst in people. "We need to ask you some questions. I've told you everything I know. We need you to come downtown." Voluntarily, of course. But the way he said it made clear it wasn't really voluntary at all. Lorenzo nodded, started to follow, then stopped and looked back at Serafina. "Don't leave. Please. My mother needs you. Your brother's lawyers will destroy me for this." "Let them try." Something fierce burned in his eyes. "I promised you the truth about your father's company. I keep my promises, even when everything else falls apart." They took him away in an unmarked car. Not arrested. Not yet. But everyone knew it was coming. When you accuse your own family of murder, when you were part of that family, you didn't walk away clean. Serafina went back to Signora DiCarlo's room. Found her awake, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face. "I destroyed my family," the older woman whispered. "You save yourself. There's a difference." "Is there?" She turned to look at Serafina. "My sons will go to prison. My grandchildren will grow up knowing their fathers were murderers. The DiCarlo name will be synonymous with scandal." Was the truth worth all that? Serafina thought about her own father, about the company stolen from him, about her mother dying fighting a battle she couldn't win, about 9 years of struggling because powerful people decided they deserved what wasn't theirs. "Yes," she said, "the truth is always worth it." 2 hours later, her phone rang. Not her phone, they still had that. The house phone. The butler brought it to her, face pale. "Ms. Vale, there's a call for you. About your son." Her blood turned to ice. "What about my son?" The voice on the other end was calm. Professional. "Wrong. Ms. Vale, this is Detective Chun. Your neighbor called us. Your son isn't home from school. His backpack was found in the parking lot. There's been an incident." The world tilted. "What kind of incident?" "We need you to come down to the station. We'll explain everything there." She dropped the phone, ran, didn't grab her coat, didn't tell anyone where she was going. Just ran to her car and drove through the storm with her heart trying to claw out her chest. The police station was chaos. Officers everywhere. Phones ringing. Someone crying in an interrogation room. A female detective met her at the front desk. "Ms. Vale, where's my son? Where's Elliot? We're doing everything we can to locate him." His teacher said he left with a man claiming to be his uncle. The school had no record of custody changes, so they called us immediately. "He doesn't have an uncle. It's just us. It's always been just us." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Who took him?" The detective pulled out a photo. Security camera footage, grainy but clear enough. A man in a suit leading Elier by the hand. Elier wasn't fighting, wasn't scared. The man must have said something to make him trust. Serafina's knees gave out. The detective caught her, because she recognized that man. Had seen him at the DiCarlo estate. Had watched him laugh at family dinners and talk business in the hallway. Marco DiCarlo, Antonio's cousin. Would you bargain with the devil himself to save your child? Tell me in the comments. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stay silent about the recording, or your boy disappears permanently. The next 12 hours were hell wearing a watch. Serafina sat in an interrogation room that smelled like fear and bad coffee, telling the same story over and over. Yes, she worked for the DeCarlos. Yes, she'd recorded Signora DeCarlo's confession. Yes, she knew Marco. No, she had no idea where he'd taken Elliot. No, she didn't know what they wanted beyond her silence. But she knew. God, she knew. They wanted her to destroy the recording. Wanted her to recant everything. Wanted her to make Signora DeCarlo's confession disappear, so Antonio could walk free and the family could bury this scandal like they'd buried so many others. Lorenzo showed up at dawn, looking like he hadn't slept. They wouldn't let him in the interrogation room, but she could see him through the glass. Pacing, arguing with detectives, making phone calls that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Finally, they let her out. She stumbled into the waiting area, and Lorenzo caught her before she fell. "We'll find him," he said. "I have people looking. Real people, not cops who can be bought. Your family took my son. I know, and I will end them for it." His voice was cold enough to freeze blood. Marco made this personal. He crossed a line even my father wouldn't have crossed. "I don't care about lines. I want my boy back. Then help me." He pulled her into a private room. "Lock the door. Tell me everything Marco knows. Everything Antonio might have told him. Every conversation you overheard at the estate. They said if I talk, Elliot dies. If you don't talk, he dies anyway. They can't let him go, Serafina. He's a witness. He's leverage. The moment you give them what they want, your son becomes a liability." He gripped her shoulders, forced her to look at him. "The only way we save him is by ending this. Now, today, before they realize we won't surrender." She wanted to argue, wanted to scream that he didn't understand. But looking into his eyes, she saw he understood perfectly. Saw that he'd made calculations like this his whole life. Saw that in his world, mercy was weakness and hesitation got people killed. "What do you need me to do? Tell me where Marco would take a hostage. Where he'd feel safe. Where the family has properties the police don't know about." She thought back through a month of conversations. Dinners where the men talked business in Italian, thinking she couldn't understand. She picked up more than they realized. Her grandmother had been Sicilian. "There's a warehouse. South Boston. They mentioned it once when they thought your mother was sleeping. Something about the old distribution center where Papa kept the boats." Lorenzo's eyes went sharp. "I know it. It's been abandoned for years. Well, that's what we tell the city." He pulled out his phone, started texting. "I'm sending people there now. I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. That's my son." She grabbed his arm. "You're not leaving me behind. Not for this." They stared at each other. Then he nodded once. Sharp. Final. "Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. And, Serafina," his voice dropped, "what you're about to see, who I'm about to become, it's the part of me I try to leave behind. The part my father built. I need you to understand that. I don't care what you are. I only care that you help me get Elliot back." Something in his expression shifted, softened for just a moment. "Then let's go to war." The warehouse squatted at the end of a dead-end street like a rotting tooth. Broken windows, rusted doors, the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody asked questions. 3 black SUVs pulled up in silence. Men got out, not police, not exactly criminals either. Something in between. Lorenzo's people, the ones who handled problems the legal system couldn't touch. Lorenzo turned to her in the car. "When we get inside, you stay with Tony." He nodded to the driver, a mountain of a man with kind eyes. "If shooting starts, you run. You don't look back. You don't be a hero. Understood? What about you? I'm already damned. I've been since I was born. But you..." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle it made her chest ache. "You still have light in you. Don't let my family's darkness put it out." Then he was gone, moving with the others toward the warehouse. Silent. Lethal. Every inch the Mafia prints the news articles had warned about. The door exploded inward. Shouting. Movement. Serafina couldn't see from the car, but she could hear everything. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it wanted out. Then a gunshot. Single. Sharp. Final. She screamed and lunged for the door, but Tony held her back. "Boss said stay put. That's my son in there." More shouting. Something crashing. Then silence. Terrible, suffocating silence. The door opened and Lorenzo emerged, carrying something. Someone. Elliot. Her boy. Her baby. conscious and crying and alive. Have you ever felt relief so powerful it hurt? Drop a heart in the comments if this hit you. She burst from the car and ran. Lorenzo met her halfway, gently transferred Elier into her arms. The boy clung to her, sobbing, and she sank to the ground right there in the street, holding him, rocking him, whispering promises she prayed she could keep. Is he hurt? Lorenzo asked, crouching beside them. Just scared. He's just scared. She looked up at Lorenzo. His knuckles were bleeding. His suit was torn. There was something dark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Marco, in custody, along with 3 others. The police are on their way. He stood, looked back at the warehouse. It's over, Serafina. Antonio and Marco will go to prison. The evidence is solid. Your son is safe. But his voice said something else. His voice said nothing was ever really over. Not in his world. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Lorenzo pulled out an envelope, handed it to her. Everything about Meridian Holdings. Every document. Every transaction. Your father's company was sold to shell corporations Antonio controlled. The money went to offshore accounts. It's all here. Enough to take to a lawyer. Enough to get back what's yours. She stared at the envelope, at her father's legacy, at justice she'd thought was impossible. Why? She whispered. Why give this to me now? Because I made you a promise. And because he stopped, looked at her like he was memorizing her face. Because you reminded me that some things are worth more than power, worth more than the family name, worth more than survival. The police arrived. Detectives. Questions. Chaos. Elier wouldn't let go of her, so they questioned her right there on the sidewalk with her son in her lap. Lorenzo gave his statement separately. She watched him talk to detectives, watched him transform from the dangerous man who'd stormed the warehouse back into the polished businessman. 2 different people in the same skin. When they finally let her go, dawn was breaking over Boston, pink and gold and hopeful. She carried Elier to her car, buckled him in, and just sat there for a moment. Mama. His voice was small, fragile. Are the bad men gone? Yes, baby. They're gone. Is Mr. DiCarlo a bad man too? She looked in the rearview mirror, saw Lorenzo still talking to police, saw him glance her way once. Just once. Their eyes met across the parking lot, and something passed between them. Understanding. Gratitude. Goodbye. No, she said quietly. He's just a man trying to be better than he was born to be. 3 months later, Boston felt different. Maybe it was the spring sunshine replacing winter's gray. Maybe it was the fact that Serafina could finally breathe without checking over her shoulder. Or maybe it was justice, real, tangible justice, changing the shape of everything. The trial had been brutal. News cameras, reporters shouting questions. Her face on every local channel as the brave nurse who exposed Boston's most notorious crime family. She hated it, hated the attention, hated watching Signora DiCarlo wheeled into court, frail and heartbroken, testifying against her own sons. But Antonio had gone to prison. 50 years without parole. Marco got 30. 3 other family members took plea deals. The DiCarlo empire crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. And Lorenzo? Lorenzo had walked away. Not free. He'd faced charges, too, for knowing about the family's criminal activities. But he'd cooperated, turned over evidence, dismantled the organization his father had built. In the end, they'd given him probation and community service. A gift from the prosecutor who recognized the difference between a man born into darkness and a man who chose to stay there. Serafina hadn't seen him since the trial ended. He'd disappeared, and she'd been too busy rebuilding her life to chase ghosts. The lawyer Lorenzo had recommended helped her file suit against Meridian Holdings. The case was complicated, would take years, but they were optimistic. Her father's company might finally come home. She'd quit the hospital, used her savings to enroll in a nursing degree program, actually become the professional everyone thought she already was. Elier was seeing a therapist, processing his trauma, slowly becoming himself again. They'd moved to a better apartment. Nothing fancy, but the windows faced east and morning light filled the kitchen, and she could hear birds instead of traffic. Life was quiet, normal. Almost boring. She should have been happy. Mom. Elliot looked up from his homework. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you miss him? Mr. DiCarlo. The question hit her like a fist. Why would you ask that? Because sometimes you look sad, like you're thinking about something far away. He chewed his pencil. And you kept that card he gave you. The one from his mom. It was true. Signora DiCarlo had given her something before she died, just 2 weeks after the trial ended. Heart failure, the doctors said. But Serafina thought it was grief. Thought it was a mother's heart breaking under the weight of what her sons had become. The card sat on Serafina's nightstand. Creamy paper. Elegant handwriting. Thank you for giving me the truth, even when it hurt. You are stronger than you know, MD. I miss his mother, Serafina said carefully. She was a good woman who loved her sons too much to see what they'd become. But not him. She looked at her son, 9 years old and too perceptive. It's complicated, baby. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to admit they care about someone. She laughed despite herself. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always listen. He grinned. Then sobered. He saved my life, Mom. I know he's from a bad family. I know he did bad things. But he saved me. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for everything. She pulled him into a hug. Now finish your homework. We're having actual vegetables for dinner tonight. Real ones, not the frozen kind. You're getting fancy in your old age. I'm 32. Ancient. He dodged the playbook she threw at him, laughing. That Saturday, she took Eliur to the coast. Just a day trip. Ice cream and ocean air and the kind of peace she'd forgotten existed. They walked on the beach, collected shells, watched boats cut white lines through blue water. When would you finally let yourself rest after a storm? Share your thoughts below. On the drive home, they passed the DiCarlo estate. The gates were closed. The gardens overgrown. A for sale sign hung from the fence. The family was selling everything, liquidating assets to pay legal fees and restitution. The crown had fallen. The empire had ended. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she just felt sad. Her phone rang that night after Eliur went to bed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail. Hello. Silence. Then, I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Lorenzo's voice. After 3 months of nothing. Her heart did something stupid. Where are you? Far away. Someplace quiet. Someplace where the DiCarlo name doesn't mean anything. He paused. I wanted to wait until everything was settled. Until you were safe. Until I was sure calling wouldn't put you in danger. I'm safe. Eliur's safe. We're okay. Good. His voice cracked slightly. That's all I needed to know. Lorenzo. The estate sold. The money's being divided. Victims' funds. Charities. I kept enough to live on. Nothing more. He laughed, but sounded broken. Turns out you don't need much when you're not trying to maintain an empire. What will you do? I don't know. Learn to be someone else. Someone better. Another pause. Someone worthy of being remembered by people like you. You already are. No, I'm a man who let his family hurt innocent people for years because I was too afraid to break the cycle. I'm a man who needed a nurse with fire in her eyes to show him what courage actually looks like. His voice dropped, but maybe someday I'll be better. Maybe someday I'll deserve the grace you showed me. She closed her eyes. Thank you. For everything. For the truth about my father. For saving Eliur. Don't. Please. You saved yourself. I just got out of the way. That's not true. It is. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Serafina Vale. And someday, when enough time has passed, when I become someone worth knowing, maybe our paths will cross again. He paused. If you'd want that. Would she want that? This man who'd been born into darkness, but chose light anyway? This man who dismantled his own family to do what was right? This man who'd looked at her like she was something precious? Yes, she whispered. I'd want that. Then I'll work toward being someone you could be proud to know. He took a breath. Goodbye, Serafina. Thank you for teaching me that justice doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it can be quiet. Sometimes it can be kind. The line went dead. She sat there holding the phone for a long time. Then she went to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Lorenzo DiCarlo was trying to become a better man. Somewhere out there, quiet justice was being served one difficult choice at a time. And somehow that was enough. The subpoena arrived on a Tuesday morning, wrapped in official seals and legal language that made her head hurt. 6 months after the trial. 6 months of almost normal life. And now this. What does it mean? Elier asked, watching her read the document at the kitchen table. It means I have to testify again. Civil trial this time. The families who lost people to the DiCarlo organization are suing for damages. Will you have to see him, Mr. DiCarlo? I don't know, but she did know. The letter included in the subpoena made it clear Lorenzo was being called to testify about his family's entire history. Decades of crimes. His father's sins and his brother's sins and his own sins too. They were tearing apart his life piece by piece in a courtroom. The trial was scheduled for October. She tried not to think about it. Try to focus on her nursing classes and Elier's progress in therapy and a lawsuit against Meridian Holdings that was actually moving forward. But October came anyway, the way difficult things always do. The courthouse steps were crowded with protesters, reporters, and people seeking justice for family members who disappeared into the DiCarlo machine over the years. Serafina pushed through them with her lawyer, head down, ignoring the questions shouted her way. Inside, the courtroom felt like a tomb. Heavy wood, high ceilings, the kind of room where fates were decided and lives were changed forever. She sat in the witness section, waited, watched other people testify, victims' families, former associates, police officers who'd investigated DiCarlo crimes for decades. Then they called Lorenzo. He walked in wearing a simple gray suit. No expensive tailoring, no flaws. He looked thinner, older, like the weight of everything had carved years into his face. Their eyes met across the courtroom for just a second. He nodded slightly. She nodded back. Then he took the stand and told the truth. All of it. Every crime he'd witnessed. Every operation he'd participated in. Every person his family had hurt. He didn't defend himself. Didn't make excuses. Just laid out the facts in a steady voice and let the court decide his worth. It took 4 hours. By the end, half the courtroom was crying. The other half looked like they wanted him dead. When it was Serafina's turn, she kept it simple. Described her time at the estate. Confirmed the recording's authenticity. Explained how Lorenzo had helped expose his own family despite knowing it would destroy him. The prosecuting attorney tried to paint her as biased, as someone who'd been manipulated or bribed. Ms. Vale, isn't it true that Mr. DiCarlo paid you an excessive salary? $200 an hour for basic nursing care. You paid me what I'm worth. Something most employers don't do. And isn't it true that he provided you with information about your father's company? Information you used for personal gain. He gave me evidence of crime. That's called doing the right thing. Or perhaps it was payment for your loyalty? She leaned forward. Mr. DiCarlo destroyed his entire life to do what was right. He gave up his family, his wealth, his name. He could have stayed silent, could have protected his brothers and maintained his empire. Instead, he chose justice. If that's not integrity, I don't know what is. What would you sacrifice to stand up for what's right? Let me know in the comments. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Found the DiCarlo estate liable for damages totaling $200 million. Money that would go to victims' families. Money that would fund addiction programs and community rebuilding in neighborhoods the family had destroyed. Lorenzo stood when they read the verdict. Accepted it with the same quiet dignity he'd shown throughout the trial. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed him. Cameras flashed. Questions flew like bullets. Mr. DiCarlo, how does it feel to lose everything? Will you appeal? Do you have any regrets? He stopped, looked directly at the cameras. My only regret is that I didn't end this sooner. That I let my fear of losing family blind me to the damage that family was causing. He paused, but I'm grateful for the people who showed me courage looks like. Grateful for second chances I don't deserve. And committed to spending the rest of my life proving that change is possible. Then he walked away, just walked down the courthouse steps and disappeared into the crowd. Serafina watched him go, wanted to follow, wanted to say something. But what? What do you say to someone who's lost everything to gain their soul? That night, A courier delivered a package to her apartment. No return address. Just her name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a folder. Legal documents transferring ownership of a property to her name. She read through them 3 times before understanding what she was seeing. The DiCarlo estate. The mansion by the sea. All of it. Given to her with one stipulation. It had to be converted into a charitable facility within 5 years. There was a note. Brief. Classic Lorenzo. For the children who deserve better than we were given. Build something good where something dark once lived. You'll know what to do, Del. She sat there holding the papers, tears streaming down her face. Because this wasn't just a gift. It was a legacy. A chance to transform pain into purpose. To take a place where people had suffered and turn it into a place where people healed. She called her lawyer the next morning. I need to set up a nonprofit, a children's hospital, or maybe a trauma center. Something that helps kids who've been through what my son went through. That's a massive undertaking. I know, but I have the property, and I have the reason. That's more than most people start with. It took a year to get the paperwork done. Another year to raise funds and hire contractors. The mansion's transformation was slow, painful, expensive, but she worked every day toward it. Elier helped design the play areas, picked colors for the walls, suggested they name it after Signora DiCarlo, the woman who'd chosen truth over comfort in her final days. The Maria DiCarlo Children's Center opened on a bright spring morning. Flowers everywhere, politicians giving speeches, donors taking photos. But the best part was watching the first families arrive. Kids who'd been through trauma, kids who needed safety, kids who deserved better. Lorenzo didn't come to the opening. She didn't expect him to. But that night, she found a package on her doorstep. A framed photo of Signora DiCarlo, young and smiling, before the weight of her family's crimes had broken her. The note on the back said simply, she would be proud. I am too. 5 years later, Serafina stood on the cliff behind the center and watched the sunrise paint the ocean gold. The Maria DiCarlo Children's Center was thriving. 20 beds, full staff, programs for trauma recovery, art therapy, family counseling. Kids who came in broken and left whole, or at least healing. She'd finished her nursing degree and now ran the place, though she still worked patient care 2 days a week because that's where her heart was. Elier was 14 now, tall and thoughtful, volunteered at the center every summer. Want to be a therapist someday, to help other kids like me, he said. Kids who went through scary things but survived. Her lawsuit against Meridian Holdings had settled. Not everything her father's company was worth, but enough. Enough to never worry about rent again. Enough to fund scholarships. Enough to prove that justice, though slow, eventually comes. She dated a little. A teacher, an accountant, good men, kind men, but none of them quite fit. None of them understood that she'd seen darkness and chosen light anyway. None of them had that fire that came from being forged in impossible choices. Mom, Elier called from the back door. Someone's here to see you. Tell them I'll be right there. He said he'd wait. Said he's been waiting 5 years. Another few minutes won't hurt. Her heart stopped, then started again, faster. She turned from the ocean and walked back to the center, through the gardens where kids played, past the therapy rooms where healing happened daily, up to the main entrance where a man stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets, looking at the building like it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Lorenzo DiCarlo turned when he heard her footsteps. He looked different, lines around his eyes, gray in his hair, but peaceful, like he'd spent 5 years becoming someone he could respect. You built something amazing, he said. We built it. You gave me the foundation. You gave it purpose. He stepped closer. I've been in Montana, working a youth shelter. Nothing glamorous. Just helping kids who remind me of who I might have been if I'd had better examples. He smiled slightly. Turns out I'm pretty good at it. I don't doubt that. They stood there, 5 years of distance between them. 5 years of healing and growth and becoming people who could stand in the light without flinching. Why now, she asked. Why come back now? Because I promised myself I'd become someone worthy of knowing you. Someone who'd earned the right to ask if maybe, possibly, you'd consider letting me be part of this. He gestured at the center. Not running it, not controlling it, just supporting it. And maybe, he stopped, started again. Maybe supporting you too, if you'd want that. Lorenzo, I know it's presumptuous. I know I have no right after everything. But these 5 years, every day I've worked to be better. To be the man I saw reflected in your eyes that night you stood up to my family. And I thought maybe. She kissed him. Just stepped forward and kissed him right there in front of the center, in front of the kids playing in the garden, in front of everything they'd both survived to reach this moment. When she pulled back, he looked stunned. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. A careful, let's see where this goes maybe. She smiled. You've done the work. I can see it. But this, she gestured between them. This is new territory for both of us. New territory sounds perfect. He took her hand. Careful. Tentative. Like she was something precious. I brought something for you. He pulled out an envelope. She opened it. Inside was a letter. Not from him. From Signora DiCarlo. Written before she died. Held by Lorenzo's lawyer with instructions to deliver it when the time was right. Dearest Serafina, if you're reading this, my son has finally found the courage to return to you. I knew he would. I saw how he looked at you. Like you were sunrise after a lifetime of darkness. You gave me the gift of truth in my final days. Now I give you this truth. Lorenzo is the best of us. Flawed, yes. Scarred by our family's sins, absolutely. But capable of more love and integrity than I ever taught him. He learned that from you. Build something beautiful where darkness once lived. Love someone broken and watch them become whole. And know that even in my failures, I witnessed grace through your courage. With gratitude, Maria DiCarlo. Serafina's vision blurred with tears. She knew. Even then, she knew. She was my mother. She knew everything. Lorenzo's voice was rough. She also knew I'd need 5 years to become someone who could stand beside you without bringing shadows. And are you? That person? I'm getting there. Every day, a little closer. He squeezed her hand. But I think maybe the journey is better than the destination. And I'd like to make that journey with you. If you'll have me. From the garden, Elier watched them. When Serafina looked his way, he gave a thumbs up and a grin. She laughed, shook her head, looked back at Lorenzo. Okay, let's try this. Slow, careful, no rushing. Slow and careful. I can do that. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Made him look young again. Hopeful. I've got time. We've got time. They walked through the center together. He asked questions about programs and funding. Met kids who looked at him suspiciously until Elier vouched for him. Helped in the garden. Stayed for dinner in the community kitchen. That night, after everyone left, they sat on the cliff watching stars emerge over the ocean. I used to think justice meant revenge, Lorenzo said quietly. That the only way to right wrongs was through power and force. And now I think justice is this. He gestured at the center, taking what was meant to harm and using it to heal. That's the strongest revenge there is, becoming better than what tried to destroy you. She leaned against his shoulder. Signora DiCarlo said something similar. She said quiet justice changes the world more than loud violence ever could. She was right. He put his arm around her. Careful, respectful. Thank you for showing me that. For being brave when I couldn't be. For building light in places where I'd only seen darkness. Thank you for choosing differently. For breaking the cycle. For proving change is possible. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ocean breathe beneath the stars. Two people who'd survived impossible things and found each other on the other side. Two people building something good from broken pieces. Elier joined them eventually, squeezing between them like he used to when he was small. This is nice, he said. All of us together. Feels right. It does, Serafina agreed. Lorenzo didn't say anything. Just held them both, his family now, not by blood or obligation, but by choice. By the daily decision to show up and be better. By the quiet justice of transformation. In the distance, the Maria DiCarlo Children's Center glowed with warm light. Inside, kids slept safely. Tomorrow, they'd wake up and heal a little more. Tomorrow, the work of turning pain into purpose would continue. And on this cliff, under these stars, 3 people who'd all been broken in different ways held each other and believed in tomorrow. Because that's what quiet justice looks like. Not loud, not violent, not destructive, just steady, just kind, just choosing every single day to be better than the darkness that tried to claim you. And in a world that often glorifies revenge, that choice, that quiet, persistent choice to heal instead of harm, that's the most powerful rebellion of all. The end. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that transformation is possible, that justice doesn't always roar, but sometimes whispers through acts of courage and kindness, then please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have more stories of quiet strength, of people who chose healing over hatred, of love that transforms darkness into light. Drop a comment telling us what part of this story resonated with you most. Was it Serafina's courage? Lorenzo's redemption? The power of choosing integrity over revenge? Your thoughts inspire others in this community, and we love hearing how these stories impact your lives. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that change is possible, that broken people can become whole, that justice doesn't require destruction. Sometimes it just requires the courage to tell the truth and the strength to build something beautiful from the ashes. We drop new stories every week, tales of resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of doing what's right even when it costs everything. Stories that prove love isn't always loud, but it's always worth fighting for. Thank you for being part of this family. Thank you for believing that even in our darkest moments, we can choose light. And remember, the strongest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so genuinely good, so authentically whole, that you prove darkness doesn't get the final word. Your story isn't over yet. Neither is ours. So subscribe, turn on those notifications, and let's keep exploring what it means to choose grace over vengeance, healing over hatred, and quiet justice over loud revenge. Until next time, keep choosing courage. Keep choosing kindness. Keep being the light in someone else's darkness. Because that's how we change the world, one quiet act of justice at a time.